Since we're talking about 2007 in New York, I would love to talk to you about your Rex Heuermann encounter.
Yes.
Just, start with 2007. What was that like? And how did it come about?
Okay, so let's see. I did the dumb thing of moving to a city where a guy I liked lived. And I got there, I realized he didn't actually want to date me. I was dumb when I was 22 and was like, I'm gonna go live in New York because the guy I like lives in New York. And I got there and I was working at this law firm and I was really depressed and confused and I had a lot of student loans from Dartmouth. And I just really wanted a boyfriend. So I went on a dating website actually, which I'd never done before. I've thought about whether I want to tell this part. So I didn't know what it was. And I wouldn't, had I known what it was, I wouldn't have gone on it. But it was one called Seeking Arrangement, which is like you can ask for like an allowance for men. And now I understand that's like code for prostitution, probably. Or I didn't know. I had my roommate had a friend who was on there who just found like a rich boyfriend. And I was like, it wouldn't be bad to have
I
a
am
rich
not
boyfriend.
judging you. I'm not judging you.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really like judge myself too harshly, but I understand like putting that on a soundbite makes it sound like
I
I'm
won't.
not. And if it's like given in context, I don't mind. If it's out of context, then I wouldn't want it out there. But if it was like in the context of like I'd never done something like that before, I didn't really understand what it was. I just put on there that like I was out of college and like wouldn't mind meeting someone who, if we got married, would help pay off my student loans was kind of what I put.
Yeah, contextually, it's
But yeah,
helpful for me.
that's how like so it was like I had too many student loans. I was like, I don't know how to pay them off. And if I married someone rich, like if I fell in love, I was like, if I fall in love with someone rich and he wants to pay them off, like that's okay. Also like weirdly, I gone to I had like kind of a messed up mindset around this, I think, because I had gone to Interlochen Arts Camp where like Jeffrey Epstein had a cabin. And someone had told me he was a great patron of the arts, and that was one way like young women who wanted to work in like publishing or arts would just like find an older man who was interested in your career to like go out with, and they would like try to help support you. And I was from Idaho, which was like very patriarchal, and like there it was just like men support the women. So like I had messed up ideas about gender roles back
And
then.
that sounds great. Life is like
Yeah.
when you're that young and you don't have money, it's like so hard to like stability is like it's
Yeah.
so hard to comprehend that you're like, could it be that easy? That sounds great. So
Yeah.
I
And
completely understand the confusion.
but so he was the only person I met on this website. And after that, I was like, that's a bad thing to do. Like, I was like, don't date for money. Like that sort of like disabused me of that being a good idea. These two dates I went on with. And so this was in 2007. So, and I have some like, to the best of my memory, this is what happened. And I'm always like a little in shock. I'm like, was that really him? I'm as sure as I could be, like, I believe it was him. He said his name was Andrew on the dating website, which I learned my therapist was the one who's like, well, that's his middle name. And apparently he had said that to
He used
other,
it all the time.
I didn't know that. So, like, when I just saw in the news and it said his name was Rex, which is my sister's ex-husband's name, I was like, that guy looks like that guy I went out with, but his name was Andrew. Um, and like, I feel like a little nauseous thinking about it, but I'm happy to tell the story because it's in retrospect so wild, like the way that like what actually happened and how much detail do you want? Because I can give you my full
I
account
would
of all
love
of it.
all of it.
Okay, so yeah, I
As much
met
as you're
him.
comfortable saying.
I'm happy to. I'm usually pretty much just an open book in life. He, like, I on that website, like most of the people like seemed more transactional and were like he was one person who didn't seem transactional. So I was like, he just was like actually offered to take me out on a date without like saying like any like I knew that like I knew it was like I thought he was just like a rich guy who wanted to take me out on a date. And he claimed he lived on the Upper East Side. And he had a very, very, very vague profile. And he said he worked in finance. And I had thought about working in finance because I had like a math background. So I was like, also like, oh, maybe I'll meet someone in finance. And like, maybe if it's not a good date, like he's a job connection or something. Like, you never know, like what comes out of a first date. And like, I was open to like, I'm always open if you meet someone, it could go like, turn into a romantic thing. It could just turn into like a friend. Like, I don't have that kind of rigidity around like, or expectation around like first meetings with people, I guess. So I was like, he's worth going to meet, even though like he's much older than me. And I was like, um, quite sure it was him because some of the pictures in the documentary I watched looked very much like if they weren't the same pictures on his site profile, they think they were like almost identical. There was one of him in like a suit and a red tie. I think I remember that like, and he had like glasses on in one picture. I couldn't tell really like what he looked like and how tall he was because they were sort of like close cropped of his head. But his profile was just very vague and had like a rich zip code. And now I know that's a red flag. I'd never been on an online dating site before. Like I was just this naive, very sheltered, trusting person. And he told me he had tickets to see a screening of No Country for Old Men, where I believe the filmmakers were there to talk. If my memory is right, like I believe like Javier Bardem was gonna be there, and it was like a private screening on like I want to say it was on the Upper West Side somewhere. It was wherever the Mandarin Oriental is. Because we met there first for a drink at some bar. And I remember I walked into the bar and I was like, because I had like some vague, I was both like, I was like the worst target for this because like I had the like oppression of like Idaho submissiveness. And then I also had like, I was like glammed up like a Vegas girl. So I was like wearing a mini skirt and like these like platform shoes and like a cute little outfit. And I was like much more like glammed up than I am now, I guess. And like I had like big eyelashes and like blonde hair. And like I was just like, I probably looked a little trashy, honestly. And like I walked in and he like was sitting there at the bar drinking a drink and he like almost spit out his drink and he's like, "Whoa, you're a total hottie." It's like a gross loud way. And I was like, I my skin sort of crawled from that and I was like, I kind of want to leave, but I was like too much of like a people pleaser to leave. So, and I was like, well, I'll go and like it'd be fun to see this movie. I've never been to like a screening with like the filmmakers. So we sat and talked at the bar for just a little bit, and then we mostly just went to this movie. And at the movie, he said a few things to me that were like weirdly demeaning during it. Like I remember we were sitting very close to the stage where like the filmmakers were, and he was saying, I was like, it's so cool to be in the same room with these people. It makes it feel like I could like be a filmmaker or something. He's like, there's a big difference between a person like you and a person like them, and like you're not them, basically. And like I am now, like I've been a successful TV writer for a long time, so like he was wrong, but he was like very much trying to like demean me, I guess, in ways that I didn't really like register back then as like a red flag because I lived through a lot of abuse growing up. And like that's been a thing I've had to like cope with as an adult and like go to therapy for. But I wasn't really primed to hear red flags. And the thing that like I do remember is like only ever seen two people get like really like red to the point that they looked like aroused from like excitement. And once was when I got really like ripped off like buying a mattress. And like this like sales guy was like hyperventilating and like turning red. He was like so excited. Like it was like there's this predatory thing like going on in his brain. And this man had, I also call him Andrew because that's how I met him, but his name's Rex. So Rex was, I believe he was sitting on this side of me and his face just get redder and redder during all the kill scenes. And he looked like he was like breathing heavily. And like it was like, I hadn't like, now in retrospect, I was like, he was like turned on by it. And I wouldn't have known to name it that then because I was like, just wouldn't have known how to like name any of these things back then. But I just remember that sort of like hyperventilating, like red faced breathing. And also the other thing that happened that this seared into my memory is like Javier Bardem was there to talk afterwards. And I swear he kept making eyes at me, like, get away from him. And I don't know if he just picked up on like something in his psychology that's like I recognize that from my character study, or like I don't know like how he knew that, or if that was just somehow like I'm projecting that. But long before I knew who this man was that I went on a date with, because I just thought I went on a date with like a rich finance guy in New York who was like awkward and creepy. But I had told this story about how this one time I'd been at a movie screening and Javier Bardem kept like looking at me and I was like so strange because like he was dating Penelope Cruz like right around that time and I was like there's no reason, like I knew he wasn't like making eyes at me in like a suggestive way, but he was like there was something there
He
that
could
was
have
like
been like, what is she doing with him?
I think a lot of people have like actually also asked that because like he's been described as like ogre like and like back then, I mean this was 18 years ago, he's like clearly he's put on like he wasn't a thin guy then, but he was younger looking then, and like he just he was tall and like a big guy, but he wasn't like
To
I
me,
don't know.
like you
Yeah.
can see his soul now that you know.
Yeah.
Now he's disgusting because you can see his insides on the outside
Yeah.
for some reason. But I know what you mean. He's not like conventionally disgusting.
Yeah. He
He's a
looks like a just a
guy.
rich nerd. He
Yeah.
looked like a lot of the guys from Dartmouth, and he looked like my dad's friends, and like he looked like my dad's a lawyer. Like I'm kind of estranged from my dad, but like he just looked like any rich conservative man. Like that's just and like I knew a lot of them. I went to Dartmouth. I went to a school full of frat boys whose dad looked like that. And he looked like old enough to be my dad, and I think that was the like I think he must have been like early 40s and I was like 22. He was either late I don't remember if he said late 30s or early 40s. Like I knew he was much older than me and I knew that probably wasn't appropriate, but I also just I didn't know. I was like, well, I'm over 18. Like I'm an adult now. I didn't know. So at the end of the movie, I remember we rode down on the escalator and I was like, I don't like this guy. I want to go home. And I was like trying to hurry out of there and he like tried to ask if he could at least like think he offered to just like give me money for a cab and told me like the subway was like full of germs and scary and I shouldn't get on it. And I was like, oh no, I ride the subway. I'm fine with that. And he's like, remember he pulled out his wallet and was like, are you sure you don't want money for a ride or like a ride or something? And I was like, no, no. And I left. And I wasn't going to go out with him again because like I didn't have a good feeling from that date and I didn't like the demeaning things he had said. And like I just um and also like he just didn't really want to talk about his I wanted to ask him about his work because I actually thought like the finance job he said he did, which I now know isn't real. Like I was curious about it and like he didn't seem to have a lot of knowledge about it. Like I think I felt like I knew more about it than he did. And that seemed strange. And also like he didn't seem as sophisticated as a lot of other like people in those jobs did. He didn't have quite the polish that I would have expected. But I actually found that kind of nice. I remember because I was from Idaho and I was like I always felt a little bit like an outsider in those worlds, and he sort of said he was an outsider too, is how he painted it. Um, but so I remember like I think I was texting him on my work BlackBerry for like he was somewhere to read actually because like I don't remember if I even had my own cell phone then or if that was my only phone. I think I must have had like I think I had a flip phone, and I think I used that phone, my BlackBerry, because it had like a map of the city, and it actually like you could text on it, and like it sort of was like connected when you to like for texting and emails, and I'm pretty sure I texted him from this work BlackBerry, um, and while also messaging him on the dating site, and like he wanted to go out again. And I remember I consulted with some people and I was like, I really like him. I don't want to go out with him again. And they're like, well, sometimes first dates are like not the best, but if there's anything like you're curious, like go one more time. So I'm the idiot who went on 2 dates with a serial killer.
Oh, you went a second time?
Oh, there was a second date, and this is one's far worse.
Okay, go on
So this is when I
then.
actually like got to know him.
Listen though,
So
normally that is very good advice because first dates with strangers, like that's actually great advice.
generally, yeah.
But this hindsight obviously colors that. So
So
your friend was like,
just
that same advice, like people aren't the best, try again. So what was
and
this
it's
like?
like and it was like you're only 22. You don't have that much experience with dating. Like just he might grow on you. He might and it might confirm that you really don't like him. But like they're like, what's the worst that could happen? Basically. And they like the best case scenario is you meet a rich guy and get married when you're like young and like you have it. And I was like, and at this point, I was like, I don't think I'd want to marry someone just for money if I don't like them, obviously. Then I don't. From this, I was like, you just don't date for money, is what I came out of this, like one experience. But, and it's that I had to like learn it that way, but that is how I really learned it. Um, he took me to this restaurant called Vong, which it is like he took me to proper dinner and I told him I was vegetarian because he was going to take me somewhere else, and I said I'm like a vegetarian, so I need to go somewhere that has that. And that's when he suggested this place, and he said it was near his office. I think it's in Midtown. It's closed now. It was the restaurant Danielle or whatever it was Danielle. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like this famous like French restaurant. Um, I think it was in Midtown. Yeah, you could look it up. I'm pretty sure I looked it up. I think it was like in Midtown Manhattan. And it had these like tables I remember that like you had to take your shoes off at the door. And so I was like, I didn't have any shoes on. And I was sitting and you had to like sit in these like sunken down booths so you're sort of low down and like you're sitting like almost like your feet were like in the ground already. And it was like now I'm like I was sort of like in a hole. Like and this restaurant was very dark. And I remember like there were these like I don't even know what some of these I'm not very like I just didn't have like a sophisticated background growing up with like food and didn't have a lot of exposure to like different cultures. And so I didn't even know what the food was we were eating. And he was sort of trying to explain it to me. And like, I had not touched him except to shake his hand on our first date. Like, I was just very much like, I was pretty reserved. And very quickly into this date, he kept trying to like touch my hand. He started trying to play footsie with me under the table. He started being like physical to see if like that was an option. And I was like, I'm a good girl from Idaho. I was like, please have good boundaries, basically. But I was very, like, very polite about it. And like, he sort of was like physically aggressive, I would say, at the table as we were eating. I remember he told me about his brother. He was talking about his brother and that he painted himself as someone who's like close to his brother. He said he was single, by the way. Like, he said he was single, never married, no kids. Um, like just that he was looking to get married and he asked if I would like and he said he had a dream of like retiring to like either he had bought land in South Carolina and wanted to build a house on it or he wanted to build land in buy land in South Carolina with specifically with his brother. I don't remember if it was like he said it was his younger brother or his older. I think he said it was his younger brother, but I'm not my memory of what that was not great, but I just remember he had a brother. The land was like a big deal. He said he liked hunting a lot and that like this was a passion of his. And I was like, well, I'm a vegetarian. And I was like, I think that's creepy. And he's like, oh, well, it's just clay pigeons. Like would never hurt a living thing. And now like height of hypocrisy. But at the time I was like, okay, I mean, I was from Idaho, like people had guns there, like everyone I knew had guns. Like my family didn't, but like it was just very normal for people to have guns. So like none of these things like raised a red flag for me, even though in New York, the other people in New York probably it would. To me, it just didn't. And I was telling him about I wrote a novel in college that like I put in a drawer and never published. And I had the main character and it was a girl named Billy. And I wanted to make her kind of a tomboy. And he's like, I like the idea of some of this, but like not the girl. He's like, I don't like women with like boys' names. He's like, you need to change that. No one wants to read about that. He was like weird about gender stuff and like he wanted women to be like very feminine. And I remember I just sort of like thought he was a creep from that. And I was like, okay, this isn't going anywhere. And then he started sort of like getting like the footsie thing under the table was so creepy. Like that was the thing that I just remember. Like I didn't want him touching me and I couldn't really make him stop. And then he asked like why I was on that dating website and he's like, have you ever been paid to have sex with someone? And I said, no. I was like, I'm not a sex worker. And I don't think I used that term, but that was that. I was like, I'm not that. I was like, I was like, I have student loans and my friend thought this is like one of her, I think it was, I had a roommate who she had a friend who was a paralegal who had a second job going to worship parties, and that's how she like heard about this website. Now that I'm thinking about it, and she had gotten like a boyfriend who just like bought her lots of clothes off of it, and I told him that, and he's like, oh well, he's like, if you want to be paid for that, I'll pay for it. And I was like, I don't. And I was like, I was like, I think you have the wrong idea. And I was like, I think I want to go home. And he's like, oh, well, don't get upset. And I was like, he's like, stay and finish dinner. And so I think I did stay and finish dinner, but like, I was like, I'm not going home with you. And we finished pretty quickly after that. And I got up and like had to go I remember I had these like high heeled boots. I was always wearing like mini skirts and like high heels because I was just dumb. And
Well, that's what everyone was wearing back then. It
that's
would
what
be
like
us.
that. Yeah, I mean, it was the stuff, but I was wearing like little short. it wasn't really quite
You were
appropriate attire.
22.
I was 22. I shouldn't be shaming myself.
No,
I was thinking back on like what I was doing and
figuring it out. So you don't know who you are. You're trying to figure it out.
yeah,
You're like, maybe
that's
I'm the kind of girl who can get paid money to do something I want to do anyway. Like it's
I didn't know. I was from a very like restrictive, like overly controlling religious background in Idaho that we lived in Las Vegas where like everyone like it's like just so part of the culture. I just didn't know what to think for myself yet. And I had to figure it out on my own. And like I had my mom was like very feminist person and has like a PhD and she's a college professor, but like that was like a hard one thing for her. And like she had to figure it out late in life too. And so like I was learning alongside my mom kind of,
yeah.
I guess. And I had my sisters to look to, but I didn't have any like I didn't have like a the only good man I had as a model was my grandpa and like he was like ill at that point and like he wasn't somebody you could talk to about like dating and sex or anything like that. It was he was like my math tutor when I was like younger. And like he was a lovely human, but it was a different time and I didn't I just didn't know what to think. But so I got up, got my boots on at the door. I remember as we were walking out of the restaurant, he like tried to like hold the door for me. Like he acted like an appropriately mannered person for the most part with like just like opening the door. Like he tipped reasonably at the restaurant. Like I remember um this was sometime in the fall. I don't remember it being that cold out. Like I thought, but it was I remember he was wearing a long overcoat that was like it looked nice. He was wearing like a nice coat and he pulled out these like brown leather driving gloves and like slowly like peeled them on his hands. And he's like, let me give you a ride home at least. I remember the gloves going on. I remember him trying to like, get me to like take a ride from him. And then I said, no, I'm okay with the subway. And at some point, I don't remember if it was this date or the other one. He kept saying that the subway was full of germs. And at some point, he's like, it's icky. And he did that with his fingers. And he's like, don't ride the subway. It's icky. And he's like, aren't you scared of the people on the subway? And I said, no, I am. I was like, the mayor rides on the subway. All the partners at the law firm I work at ride the subway. Like the subway's perfectly fine here. Like that's how people get around. And I was like, it's kind of weird you're driving. And like I was like, that's weird. Like I clicked in my brain like that was weird. And I was like, and I started hurrying along because I was like, I need to get away from this guy because he's like a big guy. And like I was like, I'm I'm tall-ish, like I'm 5'8", so but I'm like I don't look tall. Like people like I rode crew in college, but people also I was the coxswain because I'm very petitely built, even though I have like people always think I'm littler than I am.
Yeah.
But and like I'm not an intimidating presence, and he really was. And he hurried after me, and then he like I remember he like pulled out his wallet, and he is like, "Let me give you money for a cab, or let come home with me here." And he's just waving money at me, and I remember at that point there's a voice in my head that just said, "Run! He's going to kill you." He's a serial killer, like run, basically, or like he's a like you could get killed. Like this is a man who would murder you. And even though I felt insane, I started running as fast as I could. And I didn't know New York that well, but I don't know if like it was near Penn Station. I don't know if that's anywhere near this. It was like one of those big stations was somewhere nearby, and I knew that. And I started running as fast as I could down this like street that was like kind of uneven. And I was like, I just have to get to the subway and get away from him. And I sprinted in high heel boots. And I was like, I don't care if I look stupid. I was like, the worst that will happen is I look dumb. And that's better than if like this man like actually does something to me or like, cause I actually had this feeling of like, he was gonna like try to force me to come with him if I like actually like came back and took, like if I had actually taken the money that he for a cab that as he claimed it, like I felt like I was gonna go to another location. And I did have that bad feeling, even though I didn't know why. Um, and
So
I ran away and then I blocked or I like unmatched him or I actually deleted that website after that. I was like, this is a horrible idea to go. And I didn't date online again until like in I think I tried it like once for like a couple months before I met my fiance, like years and years later when I lived in LA. And then after he died, I got on one dating app like a year after he died and like that's my only experience on dating apps because this experience was so horrible it was like there's no one good. um so And then after that, I remember the craziest part of this was I'm pretty sure I texted him and messaged with him on my work BlackBerry, which I really wasn't supposed to do. And then shortly after that, and this dumb thing happened. And this is partly why I quit working there. It's like um our office was like on the 17th floor of this law firm, and I was like tripped getting into the elevator, and somehow my like BlackBerry like spun around and hit the back of the wall and then came back and went down the elevator shaft, and it got lodged somewhere in the elevator shaft, and like the building could never recover it, and like it's probably still there, as there's probably like text messages like from him from whatever phone he was using on this BlackBerry in the elevator shaft at like Battery Park Plaza, which I think that's crazy. I think that's one of the craziest parts of this. There's this little like nugget of something like hiding there. When
Yeah,
I
I
saw
believe
this case come out, and his name was Rex, and I was like, and I thought, oh, it's my sister's ex-husband's name, and I was like, that's weird. But so when I saw the news, I was like, God, that looks like that guy Andrew I went out with, and I was like, but his name was Andrew, and he was in finance, and that guy's not those things. And then I was talking to my therapist, and I think I told my therapist, I was like, I think that's the guy I went out with. I think I went out with him. Oh, the other thing he said to me, I'm remembering this about my date with him, is that he kept asking if I would ever want to like go live in South Carolina, because he was talking about like buying a house there. And he was like, what if he's like, sometimes I think about like retiring early. And he's like, would you like to get, what would you think if we ended up married and you lived down there?
weird.
Which is crazy because I now know he's married, but I was like, was he trying to have like two wives? Like that was
What charade is he? It's terrifying. You don't know what a serial killer is going to do, frankly. But he
right.
murdered somebody. If this was in the fall, he murdered someone in July, you
Yeah,
know,
this was,
of
I
that
want to say,
year.
like if I had, it was sometime between like September and November is probably when I met him,
Yeah, so he murdered someone a few months earlier.
which,
We know that he didn't murder, he went on a lot of dates. And, like,
yeah,
not everybody was a murder target
victim. Yeah,
because we know specifically he would only do that when his family was traveling. And,
yeah,
presumably it's like if he saw you twice and in public, that's really would be really risky to harm you.
right.
Not to say he wouldn't harm you in less sinister ways slightly. It's just, like what are you after? Like, were you after some like admiration? Like, what did you, in hindsight, like what was he
I
trying to
mean,
get from you?
my take on him then was he was a horny dude and he was looking to fuck someone. And like, just to be blunt, like he was looking for sex. And like, seemed like his main thing. He really wanted to like be physical with someone. And he might have just, if he had put me in his car and driven me home, he might have just like taken me to my apartment. I had roommates. He also asked like if I had family who lived in New York. Like he kind of I didn't have any family there. I did live with roommates. So maybe he was trying to vet like if I disappeared, would anyone notice? I don't. There were some questions about like my family relationships and like who knew me and like would I be like where I worked and stuff like that. But like he definitely like for all I know, I just could have like had sex with him or something, which would have been really gross. But I'm glad I didn't. Like, that's my guess. Is probably just sex, or like, and probably would have been violent sex, is my guess, because he seemed big and not gentle.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, he wasn't. He he was sort of like he pawed at me is how I would put. Like I felt pawed at, and like it's so awkward with like you don't ever want to make a man feel bad about himself for like if his intentions are good and he's just awkward. And like the thing about him is he was like there was a sweetness to him in a weird way. Like I don't know, it was a mix of like pervy, like he, but also like I have a sheltered, naive background from Idaho, and like he had that to him. He
Hmm.
had that side of just like there was like he was a reasonably good conversationalist. There was like he wasn't like and he was curious about like me and getting to know me, and like he wasn't like he was misogynistic in how he talked to me and sort of like controlling, and like there were like hallmarks of abuse, but he was also um like some men are very impersonal, and he wasn't that like, and I felt like he was confiding like real emotionals. Like he was emotionally tuned in, which is the part that's like you wouldn't necessarily expect, I guess. He did pay for dinner at an expensive restaurant, but and he put it on his work card. I remember that. Like I think I'm quite sure he paid for it as like a work expense. Now that he had a wife at home, like I feel terrible. That
Oh,
part
that's
I like.
not your
That
fault.
part I like. I feel bad for her and the his kids. Like I think I could be wrong about this. I think there was a picture in the documentary of him that he had cropped his daughter out and put out on a dating website.